The lights on the bridge of the USS Defiant flickered as the ship moved through the final approach to Vexari space. Captain Nathan Elias stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main screen as the alien station grew larger. This was humanity's big moment. First official contact with the Vexari Dominion. "Status report," Captain Elias said, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. Lieutenant Sam Wells looked up from his console. "All systems normal, Captain. The Vexari station has acknowledged our approach and provided docking instructions, Captain." Elias nodded. 6 months of travel through deep space had led to this moment. Earth's long-range communications had picked up Vexari signals 3 years ago, and after careful study and preparation, humanity was ready to join the galactic community. "Communications Officer Turner, please send our greetings as we discussed," Elias said. Heather Turner, a young officer with bright eyes and steady hands, nodded. "Yes, Captain." Her fingers moved across her console as she transmitted the carefully crafted message that Earth's best linguists had prepared. The response came almost immediately. The main screen filled with the image of a Vexari official. The alien had gray-blue skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and spoke through a thin mouth that barely moved. "USS Defiant, we welcome you to Vexari space. Please proceed to Docking Bay 7 and prepare for boarding and inspection, as per interstellar code." Captain Elias stepped forward. "Thank you for your welcome. We are honored to meet the Vexari people and look forward to establishing friendly relations between our worlds." The Vexari official blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. "Proceed to docking Bay 7. The screen went dark. "Not the warmest welcome," said First Officer John Bennett, standing beside Elias. "They're an ancient civilization with established protocols," Elias replied. "We're the newcomers here. We follow their lead for now." The USS Defiant, pride of Earth's small but growing fleet, eased into the massive Vexari station. Through the viewports, the crew could see dozens of ships from what must be many different worlds. Some were sleek and clearly built for speed. Others were huge and blocky like space-going warehouses. "Look at all those ships, why," said Engineer Peter Davis. "Some of those designs are incredible." "Focus, everyone," Captain Elias said. "Remember your training. The Vexari are known to be formal and particular about their customs. We represent all of humanity today." The ship docked with a gentle thud. Airlock systems engaged and pressure equalized. Heather Turner suddenly frowned at her console. "Captain, I'm receiving a strange transmission. It seems to be directed specifically at our communication systems." "Put it through basic analysis first," Elias ordered. "It could be anything from a welcome message to docking instructions." Turner nodded and ran the transmission through the ship's filters. "It appears to be some kind of data packet. The computer says it's safe." She pressed a button to accept the transmission. The moment she did, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed on every console. "What's happening?" Elias demanded. Sam Wells looked up with confusion. "Captain, our systems are being accessed remotely. The Vexari they're downloading our entire database. Shut it down." Elias ordered. "I can't," Turner cried out. The transmission activated some kind of override. Before anyone could react further, the airlock doors slid open. A dozen Vexari security officers stormed onto the bridge, each carrying what looked like weapons. The lead Vexari stepped forward. "Captain Nathan Elias and crew of the USS Defiant, you are under arrest for violation of Interstellar Code 347B, Section 12, unauthorized data transmission within a sovereign station." "What?" Elias stood his ground. "There must be some mistake. We sent only the greeting message. Your communications officer activated a prohibited scanning protocol," the Vexari stated coldly. "The penalty is immediate seizure of your vessel and detention of all crew members." Elias looked at Turner, who shook her head in bewilderment. "I didn't scan anything," she insisted. The Vexari ignored her protest. "You will be separated and processed according to Dominion law." As the security officers moved to surround the crew, Captain Elias realized with growing horror that this had been no accident. The Vexari had been watching, waiting, and planning this encounter. Somehow they had set humanity up to fail from the very beginning. Captain Elias woke up on a hard bed in a small cell. The walls were smooth and gray with a faint blue glow. He sat up slowly, his head pounding. The last thing he remembered was being forced away from his crew and into a small transport ship. Finally, "Awake, human?" a voice said from across the room. Elias turned to see another bunk on the opposite wall. A man with dirty blonde hair and a week-old beard sat there, watching him with tired eyes. "I'm Paul Green, engineer from the trading vessel North Star. Been here about 3 months, I think. Hard to tell time in this place." "Captain Nathan Elias, USS Defiant," Elias replied, rubbing his temples. "Where are we?" Paul gave a short, bitter laugh. "Welcome to the Judgment. Biggest prison ship in the Vexari fleet. Home to anyone who breaks their impossible rules." Elias stood up carefully and moved to the small window in their cell door. Outside was a wide hallway with similar doors lining both sides. Guards with the same gray-blue skin and 4 eyes as the Vexari he had met before patrolled the hall. "My crew?" Elias asked. "Scattered throughout the ship, probably," Paul said. "They like to separate groups, makes it harder to plan anything." Elias turned back to his cellmate. "What did you do to end up here?" "Used the wrong docking protocol at a Vexari trading post," Paul shrugged. "Turns out they change their codes. Every 60 days, but don't tell anyone. Set me up to fail, just like they did to you." A loud buzz filled the air, and all the cell doors slid open at once. "Mealtime," Paul explained, standing up. "Follow me, and don't make eye contact with the guards." They joined a stream of prisoners walking toward a large open area. Elias was shocked to see dozens of different species, some humanoid, others completely alien in form. Some had tentacles, others had multiple limbs or strange skin colors. All moved with the same defeated shuffle. In the eating area, they collected trays of bland food and sat at a long table. Paul nodded toward a small creature with red scales and 6 limbs. "That's Krex. He's been here 5 years. His planet tried to join the Vexari trade network and ended up becoming a mining colony instead." Paul lowered his voice. "The Vexari do this to everyone. They find emerging spacefaring civilizations, wait for them to make some minor mistake, then use their laws to take control." "How many species are imprisoned here?" Elias asked, looking around. "At least 30 that I know of. Some have been fighting the Vexari for generations. Others gave up and accepted their rule." Elias felt a cold determination building inside him. "We need to find a way to contact my ship. One of my officers, Lieutenant Olivia Ward, wasn't on the bridge when we were taken." Paul looked surprised. "You think she's still free?" "Ward is. High tactical officer. If anyone could evade capture, it's her." Later that day, while working in the prison laundry facility, Elias noticed something strange. The Vexari guards followed an extremely precise schedule. Every task, every movement, happened at exactly the same time each day. "They're obsessed with rules," Paul explained as they folded uniforms. "Everything must be done according to procedure, no exceptions." That evening, back in their cell, Elias found something under his pillow. A small metallic disc, no bigger than a coin. When he picked it up, it vibrated slightly. "What's that?" Paul asked, eyes wide. "I think..." Elias turned it over and saw a tiny Earth symbol etched on one side. "It's a quantum transmitter. Extremely short range, but undetectable by standard scanners." "How did it get here?" Elias smiled for the first time since his capture. "Lieutenant Ward. She must have found a way to get it to me." When the lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Elias pressed the center of the disc. A tiny hologram appeared above it, showing Lieutenant Ward's face. "Captain, if you're seeing this, you're alive. Good. I've managed to avoid capture and have hidden the shuttle in an asteroid field near the station. I've been studying the Vexari and made a discovery. They've been watching Earth for decades. They set us up from the beginning." The hologram flickered. "Their fleet is preparing to move toward Earth. We have 3 weeks at most. But sir, I found something else. Their laws. They're complex, but full of contradictions. If we can understand Then maybe we can use them. I'll contact you again tomorrow. Stay alive, Captain. The hologram vanished, leaving Elias in the dark, his mind racing with possibilities. The prison library was small but useful. Captain Elias sat at a basic computer terminal while Paul kept watch near the door. They had 3 hours of educational time each day, a right that even the strict Vexari could not deny their prisoners. Find anything yet? Paul whispered. Elias scrolled through another section of Vexari legal code. Maybe. Their laws are incredibly detailed. There seem to be rules for everything. A tall man with short gray hair approached their table. Kevin Spencer, the USS Defiant security chief, had been found 2 days earlier working in the prison kitchen. Captain, Kevin said quietly, sitting down. I've memorized the guard rotation patterns for the East Wing. They never change. Not by a single second. That matches what we've seen everywhere else, Elias replied. The Vexari are creatures of absolute routine and rule. Kevin tapped his temple. Photographic memory, sir. I've been watching them for days. They don't just follow the rules, they worship them. Elias turned the screen toward Kevin. What do you make of this section? It's about the rights of accused species. Kevin's eyes moved rapidly across the text. Interesting. It says any species accused of violating Dominion law must be given access to all relevant legal texts, but we've only been allowed to see basic regulations. Exactly, Elias said. They're breaking their own rules by limiting our access. The terminal suddenly beeped and displayed a message. Library session ending in 5 minutes. We need more time, Elias muttered. Paul leaned closer. There's another prisoner who might help. A doctor from your ship. She works in the medical bay helping injured inmates. Dr. Lewis? Elias asked. That's her. She has more freedom to move around. The Vexari trust doctors for some reason. Later that night, the quantum transmitter vibrated under Elias's pillow. Again. He waited until the cell lights dimmed before activating it. Lieutenant Ward's tiny hologram appeared. Captain, I've infiltrated a small Vexari outpost disguised as a maintenance worker. Their systems are extensive but not well protected against someone who knows what they're doing. I've discovered something alarming. Ward's image flickered as she looked over her shoulder. The Vexari fleet is preparing for what they call administrative integration of Earth. From the files I've accessed, that means total colonization. They'll use our supposed violation of their laws as justification to take control of our planet. Elias clenched his jaw. How much time do we have? 3 weeks, maybe less. They're very efficient. Ward's hologram showed her working on something, off-screen. I've been studying their communication protocols. They're complex but follow patterns. I might be able to send false orders to delay them, but it would only buy us a few days at most. Keep working on that, Elias said. We're studying their legal system. There might be a way to use it against them. I'll contact you again when I can, Ward said before her image disappeared. The next day, Elias met Dr. Michelle Lewis in the prison medical bay, pretending to have a headache. Your vitals seem normal, Captain, she said loudly for the benefit of the guard standing nearby. Then she whispered, I've made contact with a Vexari clerk who works in the legal department. He's unhappy with how the Dominion treats other species. Elias kept his face neutral. Can we trust this clerk? I think so. His name is Xerax. He's young for a Vexari, only 200 years old. He says their society wasn't always this way. The current leaders have twisted their ancient laws. Can he get us access to more of their legal code? Michelle nodded slightly. He already has. Look under the second cabinet in the library. He's hidden a data chip there with complete access to the Vexari legal archives. Elias felt a spark of hope for the first time since their capture. Good work, Doctor. That afternoon, Elias found the hidden chip and carefully inserted it into his terminal. Thousands of legal documents instantly became available. This is it, he told Kevin and Paul. Everything we need. Kevin's eyes widened as he scanned the information. Captain, look at this section here. It mentions something called the proceeding of contestation, a right given to any accused to formally challenge their conviction. Has anyone ever used it? Paul asked. Kevin continued reading. Not in over 5,000 years. It seems the Vexari stopped informing the accused that this right exists. Elias smiled. Then they won't be expecting us to invoke it. Dr. Michelle Lewis waited nervously in the medical supply room. The small clock on the wall showed it was almost time. If the young Vexari clerk didn't show up, their plan might fail before it even started. The door slid open quietly. A Vexari entered, thinner and shorter than most of his kind. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of anxiety in his species. "Dr. Lewis?" he whispered, looking over his shoulder. "Yes, you must be Xerax," she replied. "Thank you for coming." Xerax moved further into the room, keeping his voice low. "Did your captain find the data chip? Did it help?" "He did, and it was extremely valuable," Michelle said. "But we need to know more about this proceeding of contestation. How exactly does it work?" Xerax's eyes widened. "You found that? It hasn't been used in thousands of years." He looked impressed. "The proceeding is an ancient rite. Any accused can demand a formal hearing before the High Council. They must listen and judge based only on the law, not on species or status." "And they have to grant this hearing?" "Yes. It is built into the foundation of our legal system. They cannot refuse without breaking their own highest laws." Xerax hesitated. "But no one has ever successfully used it. The legal knowledge required is extensive." Michelle smiled. "Our security chief has a photographic memory, and our captain is a quick study." Later that day, Michelle brought Captain Elias to the medical bay again, this time with a fake hand injury. While pretending to wrap his hand, she told him everything. "Xerax says we need to file the request formally through the prison administrative system," she explained quietly. "Once filed, they must respond within 3 days." Elias nodded. "Kevin has memorized all the relevant sections. We'll need to word the request perfectly." "There's more," Michelle added. "Xerax is willing to help coach you on Vexari legal traditions and ceremonies. They're very particular about how things are done." "When can we meet him?" "He can access the library during your educational period tomorrow. He'll pretend to be doing system maintenance." The next day, Captain Elias sat at his usual terminal in the library. Kevin and Paul were nearby, watching for guards. A Vexari in maintenance uniform approached the terminal next to Elias. "Captain," Xerax said softly, keeping his eyes on the screen. "I've transferred all the ceremonial protocols to your terminal. Study them carefully." "Why are you helping us?" Elias asked while scrolling through the new information. Xerax paused. "I was raised on stories of the old Vexari Dominion. We were once guides to new species, not conquerors. What we do now, trapping others with laws they cannot understand, it dishonors our ancestors." Elias looked at the young Vexari with new respect. "If we succeed, it could change things for everyone." "That is my hope," Xerax replied. "But be warned, the Council will not make this easy. They will use every trick and technicality against you." That evening, when Lieutenant Ward contacted him, Elias shared their plan. A legal challenge? Ward's hologram looked skeptical. "Can it really work?" "It's our best chance," Elias explained. "The Vexari are bound by their own rules. If we can prove they violated their laws by entrapping us, we might force them to release us and leave Earth alone." Ward nodded slowly. "I'll do what I can from here. I've gained access to their communication system. I can monitor the Council's reaction when you file your request." "Good. We'll need every advantage," Elias said. "How's the Defiant?" "Still impounded at the station, but I've been in contact with communications specialist Diane Carter. She managed to hide in the ship's maintenance shafts during the capture. She's working to regain control of our systems." The next morning, Captain Elias stood before a prison administrative terminal. Paul, Kevin, and 3 other crew members they had located stood behind him for support. With steady hands, Elias entered the formal request for a proceeding of contestation, using the exact legal language Xerax had provided. The terminal processed the request for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, the screen flashed with a message. "Request received, processing." "Now we wait," Kevin said. 3 tense days passed. On the morning of the fourth day, guards appeared at Elias's cell. Nathan Elias, the lead guard, announced, "By order of the High Council, you are summoned to attend the proceeding of contestation. You will represent your species and crew." Elias exchanged a quick glance with Paul. Their plan was working. "The council awaits," the guard said. "Follow us." The High Council chamber was a massive circular room with soaring ceilings. 7 elder Vexari sat on raised platforms, looking down at the center floor where Captain Elias stood alone. Hundreds of other Vexari filled the viewing areas that surrounded the chamber. Elias wore the formal legal attire that Xerax had provided, a long blue robe with complex patterns along the edges. He stood with his hands at his sides, exactly as the ceremonial instructions had described. The head counselor, an ancient Vexari with pale blue skin, leaned forward. "This proceeding is most unusual. No inferior species has invoked this right in 5,000 years." Elias kept his face calm. "With respect, High Counselor, the Vexari legal code does not recognize any species as inferior. Section 3, paragraph 7 of your founding covenant states that all sentient beings stand equal before Vexari law." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The head counselor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "You are well versed in our laws for an outsider," he said. "I have studied them carefully, as is my right under the Accused Species Protection Act," Elias replied. Another counselor spoke up. "What exactly do you contest, human?" Elias stepped forward, precise in his movements. "I contest 3 things. First, that my crew and I knowingly violated any Vexari law. Second, that the Vexari Dominion has legal authority over Earth or its citizens. And third, that the arrest and detention of my crew follows proper Vexari legal procedure." The council members exchanged glances. The head counselor spoke again. "These are serious challenges. Do you have evidence to support them?" "I do," Elias said confidently, "and I wish to present it according to the full ceremonial procedure." This caused even more murmurs among the Vexari audience. The full ceremonial procedure was the most formal and ancient way to present a case. "Very well," the head counselor said reluctantly. "Proceed." Elias began the ritual phrases that Xerax had taught him, speaking in the formal Vexari legal language. Each word was pronounced perfectly, each gesture executed with precision. The chamber grew absolutely silent as the Vexari watched in amazement. Meanwhile, on the prison ship, Paul Green sat with Dr. Lewis, Kevin Spencer, and other crew members in the common area. They had gathered around a small screen where communications specialist Diane Carter had managed to hack into the council chamber's broadcast system. "Look at the captain," Kevin said with pride. "He's not making a single mistake." "Xerax taught him well," Dr. Lewis said. Diane adjusted the device she had built from spare parts. "I'm broadcasting this to every cell block in the prison, all the other species need to see this." Back in the council chamber, Elias had finished the opening ceremony and began presenting his first argument. "The communication my officer accepted was deliberately designed to trigger our systems," Elias explained. "The data packet contained code specifically written for Earth technology. This could only happen if the Vexari had studied our systems in detail before our arrival." He activated a small projector Xerax had provided, showing the data code that Lieutenant Ward had recovered. "This code contains Vexari security markers dated 3 Earth years ago," Elias continued. "Long before our first contact. According to Section 42 of the Contact Laws, any pre-contact surveillance of an emerging species is strictly forbidden." The council members shifted uncomfortably. "Furthermore," Elias added, "Section 89 clearly states that no species can be held accountable for violations they could not reasonably know existed. We had no access to Vexari law before our arrival." The head counselor leaned forward. "These are interesting points, human, but they do not change the fact that your officer activated a prohibited scanning protocol." "With respect, High Counselor," Elias replied, "she did not. What Officer Turner activated was a standard acceptance protocol for incoming messages. Your own records, which I request be displayed now under right of evidence review, will show this. Reluctantly, the council displayed the records. The data clearly showed that Turner had not initiated any scan. As you can see, Elias said calmly, no violation occurred. What did occur was a deliberate attempt to create the appearance of a violation as a pretext for detaining us. The head counselor's eyes narrowed. You accuse the Dominion of deception? Present facts as the law allows me to do, Elias replied carefully. The council may draw its own conclusions. From her hidden location in the Vexari outpost, Lieutenant Ward watched the proceedings through a hacked feed. She smiled as she saw Captain Elias completely in control, using the Vexari's rigid adherence to procedure against them. Well played, Captain, she whispered. Well played. The second day of the trial brought even more Vexari spectators to the council chamber. Word had spread quickly about the human who dared to challenge their legal system. Captain Elias stood confidently in the center of the room, ready to present his most important argument. Today, Elias began, I will invoke subsection Omega of the founding covenant. The chamber went completely silent. The head counselor's four eyes widened. Subsection Omega is a sealed portion of our most ancient laws, he said. How do you know of it? Elias smiled slightly. As you know, High Counselor, I was granted full access to all legal texts as my right under the law. Subsection Omega was included in those texts. This wasn't entirely true. Zyrax had specifically pointed out this obscure section to him, knowing its power, but Elias couldn't reveal his Vexari ally. Subsection Omega, Elias continued, states clearly that any species capable of identifying and correctly citing three fundamental contradictions in Vexari law must be classified as a peer species rather than a subject species. I am prepared to do so now. The council members exchanged alarmed looks. One of them leaned over to whisper to the head counselor, who nodded gravely. Proceed, the head counselor said. But be warned, this test has never been passed. Elias took a deep breath. Everything depended on this moment. He had spent hours working with Kevin Spencer to find the perfect contradictions. First contradiction, Elias began. Law 347b states that all species must follow Vexari communication protocols when docking at a station. However, Law 295a states that no species can be penalized for following their own protocols if they have not been provided with updated Vexari standards at least 30 days prior to arrival. We were given no such standards. The head counselor frowned but nodded for Elias to continue. Second contradiction. The Settlement Act declares that any world lacking faster-than-light travel capability is protected from colonization. Yet the Integration Directive permits administrative control of worlds that violate Dominion law, regardless of their technological status. These two laws cannot logically coexist. Murmurs spread through the audience. Many Vexari were checking their own data devices, verifying Elias's claims. Finally, Elias said, the founding covenant itself states in its opening declaration that the Vexari exist to guide, not govern, the younger races of the galaxy. Yet the current legal structure removes all autonomy from those races, governing them completely. This contradicts the very foundation of your legal system. Complete silence filled the chamber. The council members looked deeply uncomfortable. The head counselor leaned back, his eyes blinking in rapid sequence. The human has correctly identified three contradictions in our laws, he admitted reluctantly. Under subsection Omega, we must recognize humanity as a peer species. A wave of shocked reactions swept through the chamber. Many younger Vexari actually applauded. The older ones looked outraged. In that moment, Science Officer William Jackson, who had been brought to observe the proceedings, handed Elias a small note. It contained one word: sovereignty. Elias immediately understood. High Counselor, now that humanity is recognized as a peer species, I draw your attention to Treaty Law 87, which states that no peer species may be subjected to integration without both a unanimous council vote and the express consent of the species in question. Furthermore, Elias continued, Any attempt to forcibly integrate a peer species constitutes an act of war against a sovereign entity, violating the prime directive of non-aggression that forms the cornerstone of Vexari interstellar policy. The Seer Council chamber erupted in chaos. Younger Vexari cheered openly now. The council members argued among themselves. The head counselor pounded his ceremonial staff for order. Meanwhile, on the prison ship, the crew of the USS Defiant and prisoners from dozens of other species watched in amazement. "He's done it," Paul whispered. "He's actually done it." Dr. Lewis smiled. He found the one thing they couldn't ignore, their own most sacred laws. Kevin nodded. "And he's not finished yet." Back in the chamber, the head counselor finally restored order. His voice was strained as he addressed Elias. "Captain Nathan Elias of Earth, the council requires time to consider these legal matters. We will recess for one full cycle and reconvene to deliver our decision." As the Vexari filed out of the chamber, many of the younger ones looked at Elias with what seemed like respect. A few even nodded to him. The seeds of change had been planted. Outside the council chamber, hidden in maintenance tunnels, Xerax smiled. "Well done, human," he whispered. "Well done." The council chamber was even more crowded when proceedings resumed the next day. Rumors had spread throughout the Vexari station and beyond. Many high-ranking Vexari from other ships had arrived to witness this historic event. Captain Elias stood calmly in the center of the chamber. Though inside he felt anything but calm. Everything depended on how the council responded today. The 7 council members entered and took their seats. The head counselor looked tired, as if he hadn't slept. The youngest council member, seated at the far end, seemed almost excited. After careful consideration, the head counselor began. "We acknowledge that Captain Nathan Elias has correctly identified 3 contradictions in our legal system. As required by subsection Omega, humanity is hereby recognized as a peer species." Murmurs of approval and shock rippled through the audience. "However," the head counselor continued, raising his voice, "this does not change the fact that a violation of our laws occurred. The council has voted to proceed with administrative integration of Earth, with certain accommodations made for humanity's new status." Elias kept his face neutral, but his mind raced. They were trying to find a middle ground, acknowledging his legal victory while still moving forward with their plans. "With respect, High Counselor," Elias said, "Treaty Law 87 explicitly forbids integration of a peer species without their consent. Earth does not consent." The head counselor's eyes narrowed. "We have determined that Treaty Law 87 applies only to species that have been peer species for at least one full cycle of the central star. Since humanity was only recognized today, the law does not yet apply." This was a twist Elias hadn't expected. He glanced at William Jackson, who subtly shook his head, indicating this interpretation was not valid. But how to challenge it? "High Counselor," Elias said carefully, "I request the right to consult the original text of Treaty Law 87 under the historical accuracy provision." "Denied," the head counselor said quickly. "The council's interpretation is final." The youngest council member suddenly spoke up. "Point of order, High Counselor. The historical accuracy provision cannot be denied when properly invoked during a proceeding of contestation. It is one of our oldest procedural rights." The chamber fell silent. A council member had never publicly disagreed with the head counselor. During a formal proceeding, the head counselor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in obvious anger. "Counselor Vex, you overstep your authority." "I cite the law as it exists," the young counselor replied calmly. Nothing more. Elias watched this exchange with growing hope. The Vexari were dividing over this issue. Reluctantly, the head counselor ordered the original text displayed. As Elias had suspected, it contained no waiting period. A species became protected the moment it achieved peer status. "As you can see," Elias said, addressing the entire chamber now, not just the council, Treaty Law 87 applies immediately. Earth cannot be integrated without our consent, which we do not give. The head counselor slammed his ceremonial staff down. "Enough. This human twists our laws against us. We will not be bound by technicalities when the security of the Dominion is at stake. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. The head counselor had just declared he would not follow the law. The young counselor, Vex, stood up. If we abandon our laws when they inconvenience us, then we are no longer the Vexari Dominion. We become merely conquerors, no better than the savage races we once fought against. Half the council nodded in agreement. The other half, including the head counselor, looked furious. Elias saw his opportunity. If the council is divided on this matter, there is a procedure for resolution, is there not? The young counselor Vex answered before the head counselor could. Yes, the right of succession challenge. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The right of succession challenge was an ancient tradition, rarely invoked. The head counselor rose to his feet. You dare suggest? I do more than suggest, Elias interrupted. As representative of a recognized peer species whose rights are being violated, I formally invoke the right of succession challenge against the current council Archon. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some Vexari were shouting in anger, others in support. The council members themselves were divided, arguing openly now. Above the noise, Elias called out, unless, of course, the council wishes to reconsider its position on Earth's integration. The head counselor's 4 eyes fixed on Elias with pure hatred. The challenge is accepted, he hissed. Prepare yourself, human. No off-worlder has ever survived a succession challenge. The challenge chamber was an ancient circular arena with tiered seating surrounding it. Every seat was filled with Vexari spectators. The entire proceeding was being broadcast throughout the Dominion, and, thanks to Lieutenant Ward and Communications Specialist Diane Carter, to every prison cell and ship in the area. Captain Elias stood on one side of the arena. The head counselor, now identified as Archon Zorax, stood on the other. Both wore the traditional ceremonial robes for the challenge. Many expect a physical battle, Counselor Vex explained quietly to Elias before the ceremony began. But the succession challenge is actually a test of legal knowledge and application. The founder of our dominion believed that those who lead must understand our laws completely. Elias nodded. That suits me fine. Xerax had visited him secretly the night before, providing last-minute coaching on the most obscure Vexari legal traditions. Remember, Xerax had told him, the challenge always begins with the Archon asking a legal question. The challenger must answer correctly and then pose their own question. This continues until one fails to answer correctly. Now, as ceremonial, bells rang out. Archon Zorax stepped forward. Human, he called, deliberately avoiding using Elias's name or title. I begin the challenge. What is the prescribed penalty for falsely invoking subsection Omega? A clever first question, implying that Elias had been dishonest and threatening punishment. But Elias was prepared. The prescribed penalty is exile for 7 cycles, Elias answered confidently. However, as specified in the Judicial Review Act, such penalty can only be imposed after a formal determination of falsity by a unanimous council vote following a full evidentiary hearing. Archon Zorax's eyes narrowed. The answer was perfect. My question to you, Archon, Elias continued. Under what circumstances may the prime directive of non-interference be suspended for an emerging species? The Archon answered quickly, citing 3 specific exceptions. He then posed another complex question to Elias. Back and forth they went. Each question grew more technical, more obscure. Several times Elias relied on information that Kevin Spencer had memorized or that Xerax had provided. The audience watched, in amazement as the human matched the Archon answer for answer. After nearly an hour, the Archon's questions became increasingly desperate. He cited regulations so obscure that even many council members looked confused. The protocol for diplomatic vessel inspection when the visiting species has both aquatic and atmospheric members is found in which section of the Interstellar Code? The Archon demanded. Elias paused. This was outside what he had studied. He glanced at William Jackson, who subtly shook his head. Then Elias remembered something Xerax had told him. If an obscure regulation was not included in the publicly accessible legal database, it could not be used in a challenge. Archon Zorax, Elias replied calmly. I invoke the accessible knowledge principle. The regulation you cite is not contained in the public legal database and therefore cannot be used in this challenge. The chamber went silent. The young counselor Vex stood up. The human is correct. I have checked the database. This regulation is in a restricted section available only to senior council members. Murmurs spread through the audience. The Archon had attempted to cheat. My question to you, Archon, Elias said, pressing his advantage. What is the first principle of the founding covenant, the very basis upon which your entire legal system was built? The Archon smiled confidently. The first principle is that order must be maintained throughout the galaxy under Vexari guidance. No, Elias said clearly. That is the modern interpretation. The first principle, as written in the original covenant, is that all beings are born to freedom, and the role of law is to protect that freedom, not diminish it. Complete silence fell over the chamber. The Archon stared in shock. He is correct, Counselor Vex announced, reading from an ancient text. This is indeed the first principle as originally written. The Archon had failed to answer correctly. By the rules of the challenge, he had lost. The challenge is complete, Vex declared. Captain Nathan Elias of Earth has prevailed. Cheers erupted from the younger Vexari. The Archon stood frozen in disbelief. As is our law, Counselor Vex continued, the victor may claim leadership or name a successor. All eyes turned to Elias. This was more than he had expected. He could actually become the leader of the Vexari Dominion. Instead, Elias smiled. I claim neither position for myself. Instead, I ask that the Vexari return to their original principles, free my crew and my ship, sign a non-aggression pact with Earth, and release all species imprisoned unjustly under twisted interpretations of your laws. Counselor Vex stepped forward. It shall be done. By the power granted through the challenge, I accept leadership of the Council until proper reforms can be implemented. 1 month later, the USS Defiant approached Earth, accompanied by ships from a dozen formerly imprisoned species. Captain Elias stood on the bridge watching his home planet grow larger on the view screen. Mission complete, Captain? Lieutenant Ward asked with a smile. More than complete, Elias replied. We went looking for first contact and found a whole community of worlds, and we reminded an ancient civilization of what they once stood for. As they entered Earth orbit, Elias sent a simple message ahead. We're coming home, and we're not coming alone.